She wanted a viral reaction video for her prank channel, but instead, she got a felony record and a mugshot that is now the very first thing you see when you Google her name. If you want to know how a simple tray of chocolate brownies managed to destroy my entire family and put my stepsister behind bars, stay with me until the end. I'm a 24-year-old graphic designer. I'm obsessed with quiet weekends, and I have a peanut allergy so severe that even breathing in the dust from a crushed shell can send me into anaphylactic shock. And get this, my 19-year-old stepsister, Bella, decided that my medical condition was just content, waiting to happen. To be fair, looking back at that night, the flashing lights of the police cruisers were actually kind of beautiful against the snow in our driveway. I remember standing at my bedroom window looking down at the front lawn. My dad was out there, waving his arms, basically begging the officers to listen to him, trying to explain that it was all just a big misunderstanding, that his little girl didn't mean any harm. But Bella wasn't explaining anything. She was being guided into the back of a squad car, her hands cuffed behind her back, looking less like the influencer she wanted to be, and more like a scared kid who realized the world doesn't run on TikTok logic. And I'm sitting there, watching this chaos unfold, and the only thing I could feel was the cold glass against my forehead and this absolute, terrifying silence in my chest where my heart used to be. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was just done. But to understand why I didn't run downstairs to stop them, you have to understand the pressure cooker I had been living in for the last 5 years. Basically, my dad remarried when I was about 15, and he brought Linda and her daughter Bella into our lives. Linda is fine, mostly just passive. But Bella? Bella was a hurricane from day one. She was the miracle baby, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong because she was just spirited. And somewhere along the line, being spirited turned into being cruel. And being cruel turned into a desperate need for internet attention. She was obsessed with those prank wars you see online. You know the type. Air horns at 3 a.m., bucket of water over the door, saran wrap on the toilet seat. And honestly, I could have handled the immature jokes if it wasn't for the allergy. You have to understand, living with a severe allergy isn't just about being a picky eater. It's a biological vulnerability that rules your entire existence. It's constantly scanning rooms for open wrappers. It's the smell of peanut butter making your stomach drop because your brain registers it as a threat, like smelling smoke in a burning building. My throat closes up. My blood pressure drops. It is a violent, terrifying way to die. And I had explained this to Bella. I had explained it to Dad. I had explained it until I was blue in the face. Have you ever lived with someone who treated your physical safety like it was just a suggestion or an inconvenience to them? But Bella just didn't care. Or maybe she just didn't believe me. She would leave open bags of trail mix on the counter right next to my prep area. She would eat peanut butter toast and then try to borrow my lip gloss. And every time I freaked out, every time I scrubbed the counters with bleach until my hands were raw, she would roll her eyes and call me a drama queen. And here is where it gets crazy. My dad, the man who was supposed to protect me, became her defense attorney. Whenever I would bring up the near misses, he would give me this tired look and basically tell me that I needed to cut her some slack. He'd say things like, "She's just a teenager. She forgets." Or that I was being too harsh and making her feel unwelcome in her own home. He made me feel like I was the problem for having a medical condition. He made me feel like my survival instinct was an act of aggression against his new happy family. So I started retreating. I stopped eating dinner with them. I bought a mini fridge for my room and put a padlock on it. I prepared all my own meals. I was living like a tenant in a hostel boarding house. The stress was physically eating me alive. I wasn't sleeping. My hair was falling out in clumps in the shower because my cortisol levels were through the roof. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every time I walked into the kitchen, my heart would hammer against my ribs, anticipating the smell of peanuts. I was living in a state of constant low-grade terror. And looking back, I think that's what Bella hated the most. She hated that I had withdrawn. She hated that I wasn't giving her the reaction she wanted for her videos anymore. I wasn't screaming at her for leaving wrappers out. I was just silently cleaning them up and disappearing back into my room. I had become boring. And for a narcissist with a smartphone, boring is the ultimate sin. I remember one specific afternoon about 3 months before the incident. I came home and found my EpiPen bag moved. It wasn't where I left it on the hall table. I found it in the living room, unzipped. Nothing was missing, but it had been touched. When I confronted Bella, she just laughed and said she was looking for gum. Just looking for gum, in my medical kit. I told my dad, shaking, that she was tampering with my life-saving equipment, and again, he just sighed and told me I was being paranoid, that she was just curious. Internal thought. I'm sitting there thinking, am I crazy? Am I actually the villain here? Maybe I am too sensitive. That gaslighting is powerful. It makes you doubt your own survival instincts. It makes you feel guilty for trying to stay alive. I honestly think if things had stayed like that, just low-level negligence, I never would have done what I did. I would have just moved out, gone low contact, and lived my life. But Bella couldn't leave it alone. She needed to escalate. She needed the content. Long story short, the atmosphere in the house was toxic. It was silent, but it was that heavy, suffocating silence before a thunderstorm. I avoided her. She watched me. And I didn't know it then, but she was already planning the ultimate prank that was going to get her the viral fame she was so desperate for. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a prop. And she didn't care if that prop got broken in the process. It happened on a Tuesday, which feels weird to say because you expect life-altering disasters to happen on a weekend or a holiday, not a random Tuesday evening in November. I had just come home from a long shift at the design agency, and honestly, I was exhausted. My guard was down. I walked into the kitchen, and for the first time in months, the air didn't smell like tension. It smelled like chocolate. Rich, warm, melting chocolate. And there was Bella. She was standing at the island, wearing this cute apron that I had never seen before, and she was smiling. Not her usual smirk, but an actual, genuine-looking smile. She had a tray of brownies cooling on the rack, and they looked incredible. Fudgy, dark, perfect cracks on the top. She looked at me and said, "Hey, I made brownies. I know things have been weird lately, and I wanted to do something nice. Peace offering?" I froze. My first instinct was obviously suspicion. I'm standing there, keys in hand, scanning the counters. I looked for the jars. I looked for the wrappers. I looked for any sign of peanuts. The counter was clean. No residue. No jars of Skippy. Just flour, sugar, cocoa powder, and eggs. "Are they safe?" I asked. I hate that my voice sounded so small, so pathetic. She rolled her eyes, but it was playful this time. "Yes, oh my God. I used your cocoa powder. I scrubbed the bowl 3 times. I swear on my life, they are completely nut-free. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm just trying to bake." I looked at her. And for a second, just a split second, I didn't see the girl who moved my EpiPen. I saw the kid who used to ask me to braid her hair when she first moved in. I saw the little sister I actually wanted. I missed that version of us. I was so tired of being angry. I was so tired of being afraid in my own house. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that this was a turning point. So, I put my keys down. I walked over. I picked up a brownie. It was still warm. "Thanks, Bella," I said. "That's really cool of you." I took a bite. The first thing I tasted was the chocolate. It was sweet, dense, delicious. And then, about 3 seconds later, the sensation hit. It wasn't a taste. It was a feeling. It started as a tickle in the back of my throat, like I had swallowed a hair. Then, the tickle turned into a burn. Then the burn turned into a vice grip. My stomach dropped through the floor. The ringing in my ears started instantly, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at Bella. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was holding her phone up. The little red light was on. She was recording. "Is it spicy?" she asked, giggling. I added a secret ingredient. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt like it was swelling to twice its size. I dropped the brownie. I grabbed my throat. The panic is instantaneous and primal. It's not like being scared of a movie. It's your lizard brain screaming AIR. We need air. I stumbled back, knocking a stool over. I pointed at the pantry where I kept my emergency kit. I tried to wheeze out the word pen. Bella didn't move. She didn't run to the pantry. She didn't call 911. She just kept the phone steady, tracking my movement as I fell to my knees. "Oh my God! Look at her face," she narrated to the camera. "It's just a prank. Chill out. Drink some water." I was clawing at my neck now. The room was starting to go gray at the edges. My lungs felt like they were filled with concrete. I was drowning on dry land. I crawled, literally crawled, across the kitchen floor towards the pantry. My vision was tunneling. All I could see were her shoes. She stepped back to get a better angle. I managed to get the pantry door open. I fumbled for the bag. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't unzip it. I ripped the fabric with my teeth. I grabbed the EpiPen. I didn't even hesitate. I jammed it into my thigh, right through my jeans. The click of the needle was the loudest sound in the world. The adrenaline hit my system like a freight train. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would explode. I gasped, a ragged, horrible sucking sound, as my airways forced themselves open just a fraction. And that's when my dad walked in. He saw me on the floor, the injector sticking out of my leg, gasping for air. He saw Bella standing there with her phone. "What the hell happened?" he screamed. Bella immediately dropped the phone to her side. The performance switched instantly. "I don't know. She just started choking. I think she's having a panic attack." I couldn't talk. I just pointed at the brownies, pointed at her, pointed at the phone. Long story short, the ambulance came. The paramedics loaded me up. And they had to give me a second dose of epinephrine in the rig because my vitals were crashing again. I spent the night in the ER, hooked up to monitors, shaking from the adrenaline and the terror. My dad stayed with me. But the moment I could speak, the moment the doctor said I was out of the woods, the gaslighting started again. "It was an accident," he said, holding my hand. "She feels terrible. She didn't know the mix had traces in it. You know she's not a baker. She was just trying to be nice." I pulled my hand away. "She filmed it, Dad. She stood there and filmed me dying." "She was in shock," he said. "People react weirdly to trauma. She's young. Don't ruin her life over a mistake." Don't ruin her life. That was the phrase. That was the moment the switch flipped. I lay there in that hospital bed, listening to the beep of the heart monitor, and I realized something crystal clear. He didn't care that she almost killed me. He cared that I might make a scene about it. I stopped crying. I stopped shaking. The fear evaporated, and something cold and hard took its place. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was a witness to a crime, and I realized that if I went back to that house and played the forgiving sister, next time she wouldn't use a trace amount. Next time, she'd make sure I didn't wake up. I looked at my dad, right in the eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. "Okay," I whispered. "I understand." He looked relieved. He thought I meant I forgave her, but I meant I understood exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to tell him. I wasn't going to tell Linda. I was going to get the receipts. And I was going to burn her world to the ground. Have you ever realized that the person supposed to protect you is actually the one holding the door open for the wolf? I came home from the hospital 2 days later. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My dad had clearly given Bella and Linda the talk about giving me space, so they were walking on eggshells. But the air was thick with it. That fake, performative guilt. Bella wouldn't look at me. She spent the whole time hiding in her room or texting on the couch with her headphones on. I played the part perfectly. I moved slowly. I let my dad make me tea. I acted weak and traumatized, like I was too scared to even be angry. I spent the first day just sleeping in my room, or at least pretending to. But really, I was waiting. I knew Bella. I knew her patterns. She was lazy with her digital hygiene because she had never faced a consequence in her life. She thought deleting something meant it was gone forever. She didn't understand how the cloud worked. And she didn't understand that our family shared an iCloud plan because Dad thought it was cheaper and easier. The family iPad. It was usually in the living room, docked on the charging station. It was the digital hub of the house. Dad used it for recipes, Linda used it for Candy Crush, and Bella used it to edit her videos because the screen was bigger than her phone. I waited until Wednesday morning. Dad went to work. Linda went to her yoga class. Bella was still asleep. She never woke up before noon. I walked into the living room. The house was silent. Just the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the hallway clock. My hands were cold. Not from fear this time, but from focus. I felt like a bomb disposal technician walking toward the wire. I picked up the iPad. Unlock code 1975. Dad's birth year. Pathetic security. I went straight to photos. My heart was pounding in my throat. I scrolled through the recents. Nothing. Just selfies, pictures of her cat, screenshots of outfits she wanted. She had scrubbed the day of the incident. Smart, but not smart enough. I navigated to the Albums tab. I scrolled down to the bottom. Recently deleted. My thumb hovered over the folder. I knew once I opened this, there was no going back. If the video was there, it was proof of intent. If it wasn't, then maybe I was crazy. Maybe it really was an accident. I tapped the screen. There were 3 videos dated from Tuesday. I tapped the first one. It was a draft, a get ready with me style intro. Bella was in the kitchen, setting up the camera. She was fixing her hair, checking her lighting. I tapped the second one. This was it. The timestamp was 4:15 p.m., 30 minutes before I got home. I pressed play. I didn't turn the volume up. I used my AirPods. I needed to hear every breath. The video started with Bella looking directly into the lens, whispering. Okay guys, so my stuck-up stepsister has been a total bitch lately about her allergies or whatever. So today, we're going to see if she's actually allergic or if she's just dramatic. I'm making her favorite brownies. But watch this. I watched, frozen, as she reached into the cabinet. She pulled out a jar of peanut butter. Not just any peanut butter, extra chunky. She took a spoon. She scooped a massive glob of it. I'm just gonna mix this into the batter really good, she whispered, stirring it vigorously. The chocolate hides the smell. It's perfect. If she starts choking, we'll know she wasn't lying. If she eats it and is fine, then she's a liar. Win-win. She laughed. It was a small, cruel giggle. Let's see if she actually chokes. She put the spoon in the sink and ran the water to wash the evidence away. Then she turned back to the camera and winked. Stay tuned for part 2. The video ended. I sat there on the couch, the iPad heavy in my lap. The silence of the house felt deafening. I wasn't angry. I was numb. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I replayed the audio in my head. Let's see if she actually chokes. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't bullying. This was a premeditated experiment with my life. She was willing to risk killing me for a TikTok series. I felt sick, physically ill. I wanted to throw up, but I forced it down. I needed to secure this. I airdropped the video to my phone. Then I emailed it to myself. Then I uploaded it to my private Google Drive. Then I sent a copy to a secret Dropbox folder. I looked at the third video in the deleted folder. It was the footage of me dying. It was shaky. You could see me stumble back. You could hear the wheezing sound, that horrible, high-pitched stridor of my throat closing. You could hear her laughing in the background. Oh my God, look at her face. I watched myself crawl on the floor. I watched myself rip the bag open. And then, right at the end, before she cut the feed, you hear her mutter, "Shit, Dad's here." I saved that one too. I put the iPad back on the dock exactly how I found it. I wiped the screen with my sleeve to remove my fingerprints. I walked back to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed. I stared at the wall for a long time. My dad's voice echoed in my head. She didn't know, it was an accident. He was wrong, and now I had the receipts to prove it, but I wasn't going to show him. If I showed him, he would delete it. He would bury it. He would cry and beg me not to ruin the family. He would manipulate me into silence. No, this was beyond him now. I opened my laptop. I didn't search for family therapy. I searched for the non-emergency number for the local police department. My hands were cold as ice. The ringing in my ears was back, faint but steady. I took a deep breath. I wasn't a sister anymore. I was a prosecutor, building a case. This is the moment everything shifted. The moment I stopped being the victim, the poor allergy girl who needed to be protected, and became the hunter. I sat there with my laptop open, the cursor hovering over the contact page for the precinct. But I didn't call the main line. I realized that if I just dialed 911 right then, the police would come to the house, take a statement, and Bella would have time to spin it. She would cry, play the scared little girl card, and my dad would immediately lawyer up to protect her. They would claim the video was a skit, or that the brownies in the footage weren't the ones she actually gave me. I needed it to be undeniable. I needed the authorities ready to move the second the truth dropped. So, I devised the trap. Thursday was a blur of tactical movements. I called in sick to work, but I didn't stay home. First, I went to the Apple store and bought a Lightning to HDMI adapter. We had a huge 65-inch TV in the living room that my dad treated like a shrine, and I needed to be able to plug my phone directly into it without relying on the Wi-Fi casting, which Bella could easily disconnect if she panicked. I tested it in the store parking lot to make sure the audio synced perfectly. Then I did the hardest thing. I went to the police station. I didn't go to the front desk. I asked to speak to a detective in the Family Crimes Division. I ended up in a small gray interrogation room with a woman named Detective Miller. She looked tired, but she listened. I didn't cry or scream. I simply laid out the facts, and I told her that my stepsister had purposely introduced a fatal allergen into my food and filmed the reaction for social media. I explained that I had digital evidence of the premeditation and the act itself. Detective Miller watched the videos on my flash drive in silence. After she finished, she leaned back and asked me if my stepsister was a minor. I told her that Bella had turned 19 the previous month. The detective nodded slowly and basically explained that this changed everything. It meant she wasn't a child making a mistake. She was an adult committing a felony assault. We made a plan. I informed Miller about the family healing meeting my dad had scheduled for Friday night to force us to reconcile. I told her that my dad would try to bury the evidence if he saw it first. I needed the police to be there the moment the video played, but not before. I told her I would text her a signal when the family was all seated. She warned me that once we started this process, there was no going back. She said the state would press charges regardless of what my father wanted. I told her that was exactly what I was counting on. The wait. Friday came, and the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. I spent the day in my room, resting. I could hear Bella downstairs, laughing on the phone with her friends. She sounded totally unbothered. She was probably telling them how dramatic I was being and how she was the victim of my sensitivity. Have you ever listened to someone laugh while you were planning their destruction? It's a surreal feeling. I packed a bag, just the essentials like my laptop, passport, and birth certificate, and hid it under my bed. I knew that after tonight, I couldn't sleep in this house ever again. At 6 p.m., my dad called up the stairs and told me to come down because they were ordering food and it was time to talk. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired. Good. Let them think I'm weak. Let them think I'm defeated. I put my phone in my pocket and checked the HDMI adapter hidden in my sleeve. My hands were cold, but my heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady. I wasn't doing this because I wanted revenge. I was doing it because if I didn't, next time she wouldn't use a trace amount. Next time, she wouldn't miss. I walked out of my room and headed toward the stairs. I could hear the TV on in the living room. It was time. I walked into the living room, and it felt less like a family dinner and more like a settlement negotiation, where one side holds all the cards and the other side, me, is expected to just sign on the dotted line. You have to understand, my dad had gone all out to stage manage this reconciliation. He had set the coffee table with the good plates, which we literally never use for pizza. He had dimmed the lights. He even had some soft jazz playing in the background, which was just bizarre, given that his daughter had nearly died of asphyxiation in this exact room 3 days prior. It was like he was trying to use ambiance to suffocate the truth. And there was Bella. She was sprawled out on the main sofa, taking up enough space for 3 people, scrolling on her phone with this look of absolute, unbothered boredom. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She just kept tapping away, probably texting her friends about how annoying this whole thing was. Linda was sitting next to her, reading a magazine, acting like we were just waiting for a movie to start. I sat on the ottoman, the furthest seat from them. I could smell the pizza, the grease, the pepperoni, and honestly, my stomach turned. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because the last time I ate food in this house, I ended up with a tube down my throat. Have you ever sat across from someone who hurt you and realized they aren't even thinking about it, while it's the only thing thinking about? So, my dad clears his throat and basically launches into this rehearsed speech. He starts talking about how families go through rough patches and how misunderstandings happen. He looked right at me with these pleading, wet eyes and practically begged me to understand that Bella was young, that she made a mistake, and that holding on to anger was only going to poison me in the long run. I mean, the audacity was breathtaking. He was framing my trauma as a grudge. He was equating attempted murder with a rough patch. And I'm sitting there thinking, you have no idea what she is. You think she's a clumsy kid. You don't know she's a predator. Then he turned to Bella and gently nudged her, basically prompting her to say her lines. Bella finally put her phone down, sighed this huge, dramatic sigh like she was the one being inconvenienced, and looked at me. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. She gave me this half-hearted speech about how she was sorry I got sick and how she didn't think it would be that bad. She literally phrased it as if my allergy was the problem, not her actions. She said she just wanted to make a funny video and that I needed to learn to take a joke. And here is where it gets crazy. My dad nodded along. He actually nodded and told me that, see, she apologized, and now we could all move forward. He started talking about how he didn't want this incident to ruin her college applications or her reputation. He was more worried about her future than my survival. I felt the phone in my pocket. I felt the weight of the flash drive. I took a breath. I knew I had to give her the last chance. It was part of the deal I made with myself. I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she was irredeemable. I interrupted Dad's monologue about forgiveness. I looked Bella dead in the eye and asked her, very calmly, if she knew there were peanuts in the mix. I asked her to just tell me the truth, right now, and I would drop everything. The room went quiet. Even the jazz seemed to stop. Bella didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She looked at me with this chilling, flat expression and lied to my face. She claimed she had absolutely no idea, that she thought the jar was cookie butter, and that she would never, ever hurt me on purpose because she loved me. That was it. That was the kill switch. She wasn't scared. She was confident. She was confident because she thought she had gotten away with it. She thought she had scrubbed the digital evidence. She thought she was smarter than me. I nodded slowly. I told them I believed her. I watched the tension leave my dad's shoulders. He looked so relieved, so happy that he had successfully swept another disaster under the rug. He clapped his hands together and suggested we eat. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my hands were steady. I reached into my pocket and texted Detective Miller one single character: X. Then I turned to my dad and told him that, actually, before we ate, I had something I wanted to show them. I told them I had put together a video to help us understand each other better. Dad beamed. He probably thought it was a slideshow of childhood photos or something. Bella rolled her eyes and picked her phone back up, clearly checking out again. I walked over to the massive 65-inch TV mounted above the fireplace. I pulled the HDMI cable out from behind the console. I plugged in my adapter. I plugged in my phone. The screen flickered to life, mirroring my display. "What's this?" Linda asked, finally looking up. "Just a little project," I said. "I think you're going to find it really educational." I navigated to the folder. I didn't select the Get Ready With Me intro. I went straight to the video titled The Mix. I pressed play. The moment I pressed play, the room seemed to shrink. You know how in horror movies the sound always seems too loud, too crisp? That's exactly what happened. The audio from the video didn't just play. It exploded out of the surround sound speakers my dad was so proud of. First, there was just the sound of the plastic jar lid twisting open, that distinctive crick-crack of a fresh seal breaking. On the massive 65-inch screen, Bella's face appeared in 4K resolution. She looked huge, distorted by the wide angle of the phone lens, her pores visible, her eyes bright with that manic content creator energy. "Okay, guys," the giant digital Bella whispered, her voice booming through the living room like the voice of God, only twisted. "So my stuck-up stepsister has been a total bitch lately." I didn't look at the screen. I looked at them. I watched the color drain out of my dad's face. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was instant, like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He just stared at the screen, his brain trying to reconcile the daughter he thought he raised with the person on the TV who was currently spooning a mountain of extra chunky peanut butter into a mixing bowl. And Bella? I mean, honestly, her reaction was the most satisfying thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. She froze. She was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza halfway to her mouth, and her hand just stopped in midair. Her eyes went wide, not with guilt, but with pure, unadulterated terror. She recognized the video. She knew she had deleted it. She couldn't wrap her head around how it was playing on the family TV. The video continued, and the sound of the spoon scraping against the ceramic bowl was sickeningly loud. Scritch, scritch, scritch. "The chocolate hides the smell," the digital Bella narrated, winking at the camera. "If she starts choking, we'll know she wasn't lying." The silence in the living room was heavier than lead. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. We just listened to her laugh. That small, cruel giggle echoing off the walls. Let's see if she actually chokes. The video ended and the screen went black. For about 5 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the hard drive spinning down. Then, chaos. Linda was the first to react. She let out this strangled gasp, like she had been punched in the gut, and dropped her magazine. But Dad stood up so fast his armchair slid backward and hit the wall with a thud. He didn't scream. He just pointed at the TV, his hand shaking violently, and then he pointed at Bella. He tried to speak, but he was stuttering, trying to form words that didn't exist. He was looking at her like she was a stranger, like she was some alien creature that had replaced his child. And here is where Bella panic spiraled. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She went into full denial mode. She scrambled off the couch, tripping over the coffee table, and basically started screaming that it wasn't real. She was yelling that I had edited it, that it was a deep fake, that I was trying to frame her. She was literally shouting over her own recorded voice, trying to gaslight a room that had just seen irrefutable proof. I'm sitting there, completely still, just watching her unravel. I mean, it was pathetic. She was flailing, looking for an excuse, grabbing at straws. She turned to Dad and started begging him to listen, claiming that it was just a skit for an acting class, that she never actually put the peanuts in the real batch, that the video was just pretend. But then I played the second video. I didn't give her time to breathe. I clicked the next file. Suddenly, the screen was filled with the shaky, vertical footage of me dying on the kitchen floor. The sound of my wheezing, that horrible, wet, gasping noise, filled the room. It was deafening. You could hear the panic in my breath. You could see my hands clawing at my throat. And over the top of it, you heard Bella's voice from 3 days ago. Oh my God. Look at her face. It's just a prank. Chill out. That broke my dad. He let out this roar, not a word, just a sound of pure anguish, and turned on her. He wasn't the gentle mediator anymore. He was screaming at her, asking her what was wrong with her, asking her if she realized she had almost killed me. He was shouting that he had defended her, that he had lied to the doctors for her, and she had been laughing the whole time. Bella was backing away toward the hallway, her hands up, crying now. But they were crocodile tears. She was sobbing that he was being mean, that everyone was ganging up on her, that it was just a joke, and he was blowing it out of proportion. She was literally still trying to minimize it while the sound of my near-death experience was looping in the background. Have you ever watched a narcissist realize that their charm has finally run out? It's like watching a machine break down. She looked at Linda, begging her mom to step in, but Linda was just sitting there with her hands over her mouth, rocking back and forth, staring at the floor. Bella was alone. For the first time in her life, she was completely, utterly alone. And that's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ding-dong. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding. Thud, thud, thud. The room froze again. The video looped one last time. My wheezing, her laughing, before I finally unplugged the phone. The silence that rushed back in was even worse than the noise. Bella looked at the door. She looked at me. Her eyes were huge. She whispered something, asking who that was. She looked like a trapped animal. Dad looked at me too. He didn't ask. He knew. I saw the realization hit him, that this wasn't just a family meeting anymore. He looked at the door, then back at his daughter. And for a second, I thought he might try to stop it. I thought he might try to run interference one last time. But he didn't move. He just slumped his shoulders, looking suddenly 20 years older, and turned away from her. I stood up. I walked past Bella. She reached out to grab my arm. Me asking what I did, her voice pitching up into this hysterical shriek. She was demanding to know who was at the door. I ignored her. I walked to the entryway. I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door. Detective Miller was standing there, flanked by two uniformed officers. The red and blue lights from the cruisers were flashing against the snow in the driveway, painting the hallway in strobing bursts of color. "We received a distress signal," Miller said, her eyes scanning past me into the living room. "Is everyone okay?" I stepped aside. "She's in there," I said. The officers moved in. "You have to understand, watching the police enter your childhood home is a surreal experience. It feels like a movie set." Their boots were heavy on the hardwood floor. The radio chatter on their shoulders was static and sharp. They walked right past my dad, who was just leaning against the wall, staring at nothing. They walked up to Bella. She started screaming. One really screaming. She tried to run behind the sofa, scrambling like a toddler trying to avoid bath time. She was yelling that they couldn't touch her, that her dad would sue them, that this was a mistake. The female officer grabbed her arm. It wasn't gentle. She spun Bella around and pushed her up against the wall. "Isabella Vance," the officer said, her voice calm and bored, cutting through Bella's hysterics. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment." The click of the handcuffs was the most final sound I have ever heard. It was louder than the video. It was the sound of consequences finally arriving. Bella was thrashing, crying, begging my dad to do something. She was yelling at him to call his lawyer. She was yelling at Linda to help her. Dad didn't move. He didn't even look at her. He just kept his eyes fixed on the blank TV screen. As they dragged her toward the door, she passed me. Her mascara was running down her face. Her hair was a mess. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked at me with this mix of hatred and confusion, and she started sputtering, asking me why I would do this, asking me how I could ruin her life over a stupid brownie. I looked at her. I looked at the cuffs. I looked at the officers waiting to escort her to the reality she had been avoiding her entire life. I leaned in close so only she could hear me over the static of the police radios. "Smile for the mugshot, Bella," I whispered. "You're finally going to be famous." The weeks following that night were a blur of depositions, meetings with the district attorney, and packing boxes. Basically, once the police took the hard drive into evidence, the case was open and shut. My dad tried to hire a high-powered defense attorney, of course. He spent a fortune trying to get the charges reduced, arguing that Bella was a troubled youth who didn't understand the gravity of her actions. But the problem with video evidence is that it doesn't leave much room for interpretation. The prosecutor played the clip of her laughing while mixing the peanuts in court. You can't argue accident when the defendant is on tape winking at the camera and explaining her motive. Long story short, Bella pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would have been even more public and humiliating. She didn't get 20 years in prison. Obviously, the justice system is still soft on first-time offenders with nice suburban homes, but she didn't walk away either. She got 3 years of probation, mandatory psychiatric counseling, and a permanent felony record for aggravated assault. And let's just say, Ivy League colleges aren't exactly fighting over applicants with violent felonies on their transcripts. Her acceptance letters were rescinded. Her future, the one my dad was so desperate to protect, evaporated overnight. But the real punishment wasn't the legal one. It was the social one. In a twist of irony that I honestly couldn't have scripted better myself, the police report became public record. And because we live in a small town, the story got out. Someone found her TikTok account. Someone connected the dots. The peanut butter poisoner became a local legend. And then, inevitably, it went viral. People duetted her old videos. They analyzed her behavior. She became the face of toxic influencer culture. She wanted to be famous? Well, she got it. She has millions of views now, but the comments aren't fans asking for her skincare routine. They're people calling her a monster. She had to delete all her accounts. She can't even go to the local Starbucks without people whispering and pointing phones at her. She is trapped in the very digital hell she tried to build for me. As for my dad, I moved out the weekend after the arrest. He stood in the driveway as I loaded my car. He looked old. He looked broken. He tried to tell me that he loved me, that he was just trying to keep the family together. He still didn't get it. He didn't understand that by trying to keep the peace, he had been enabling a war. I didn't argue with him. I didn't yell. I just told him that I hoped he found a way to fix what was left of his house. But I wasn't going to be part of the renovation. I blocked his number. I blocked Linda's number. Now, I live in a small apartment across the city. It's not huge, and the view isn't great. But do you know what the best part is? The silence. I can leave a jar of almond butter on the counter and know it hasn't been tampered with. I can sleep with my door unlocked. I can breathe without listening for the sound of someone plotting against me. My hair stopped falling out. The ringing in my ears finally stopped. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Bella. I wonder if she's sitting in her room, scrolling through the hate comments, realizing that the internet never forgets. I wonder if she misses the sister who used to cover for her. But then I remember the sound of her laughing while I was gasping for air, and the guilt vanishes. She wanted a reaction. She wanted a viral moment. She wanted to see if I would actually choke. Well, she got her answer. I didn't choke. I bit back.